Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into the underlying mechanics of workflow automation. If you've ever found yourself wondering exactly how the digital tools we use every single day manage to seamlessly exchange information in the background, well, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to be looking specifically at n8n, which is this incredibly powerful platform, and we'll explore the literal building blocks that make all this automation possible. Let's kick things off with a massive question that really sits at the core of modern system integration. How do completely disconnected apps magically talk to each other without requiring teams of developers to write thousands of lines of custom code? I mean, how does an email arriving in your inbox automatically trigger a summary in Slack, update a Google Sheet, and generate a draft reply? It feels a bit like magic, right? But as you'll see, it's actually just highly structured mechanics. Okay, let's frame the stakes here by looking at a quote from our source material today, a fantastic Zero to Hero course by Moroni. He says, "Automation is no longer just a buzzword. It's reshaping how teams work, collaborate, and scale." And that brilliantly sets the stage for us. We aren't just talking about saving a few mouse clicks here. We're talking about engineering a massive competitive edge, saving hours of manual labor, and pretty much completely redefining productivity. So we really need to understand the environment where all of this happens. Enter n8n. It's a free, open-source workflow automation platform. You can kind of think of it as a universal connector, or like a giant digital switchboard. It links different APIs, which, by the way, are basically just the software bridges between your favorite apps, and it connects them with services and even cutting-edge AI agents. It completely handles all that complex data orchestration in the background, so you can just focus on building intelligent processes. Now, zooming in a bit closer, we arrive at the literal worker bee of the n8n ecosystem, the node. A node is the fundamental visual building block of n8n. It's the entity that actually handles passing the data and executing specific tasks. You can think of every single node as having a very specific job to do. It's either waiting and listening for a trigger event to happen, or it's performing a specific action. Section 1. Anatomy of a node and how data flows. Picture a workflow as a digital relay race. It always starts with step 1, a trigger event. Now, this could be a new chat message dropping in or a webhook being called. Once triggered, the baton gets passed to step 2, which is an action node. This node does the heavy lifting, things like interacting with a large language model or maybe fetching some data from the web. And finally, we arrive at step 3, the output payload, which is simply the result of whatever that action was. Listen up, because this right here is the golden rule of n8n, and it's the absolute secret to how n8n nodes connect workflows together. If you take away just one thing from this explainer, make it this. The output data of node A becomes the exact input payload of node B. Every node has an input and an output. Node A does its job, spits out data, and that exact data payload is essentially caught by node B, which then uses it to perform the very next task. This literal passing of the payload is the fundamental physics of how these nodes string entire systems together. But what does that baton, that payload, actually look like inside? Well, nodes usually communicate using 5 main data types. You've got strings, which are just simple text values like hello world. You've got numbers, which are, you guessed it, numeric values. Booleans, which represent straightforward true or false statements. Arrays, which are lists of items. And finally, objects, which are structured, nested data, like a neat little packet containing a user's name and their email address. Mastering these is what makes the whole system just click. Now, even though the underlying data stays exactly the same, n8n is pretty cool because it lets you look at this payload in a few different visual formats. You can view it as a schema, which is super handy for visual drag and drop functionality. You can view it as a table with standard rows and columns, which is perfect if you're a spreadsheet kind of person. Or you can just view the raw JSON, which is the underlying highly flexible format. And occasionally, you'll even deal with binary data when you're moving things like files or images around. This brings us to a brilliant illustration of how we map that data. Fixed values versus expressions. When you configure a node, you could just type in a fixed value. Actually, scratch that. A better way to explain it is like hard-coding an email address that never changes. But the real magic of workflow automation happens with expressions. Expressions let you pull dynamic data from earlier nodes. So instead of a hard-coded name, the node dynamically injects whatever name it just received in the trigger step. It adapts your workflow to real-time inputs instantly. Section 2. Branching and workflow logic. By default, these nodes want to run sequentially. Node A goes to node B, which goes to node C, just in a straight line without skipping a beat. But workflows don't always go in a straight line, do they? A single trigger can actually branch out. For instance, a new customer sign-up could trigger one branch that posts a hype message in Slack, while simultaneously triggering a totally independent branch that fires off a welcome email via Gmail. And for massive enterprise setups, you can even use subflows to manage all this complexity without your screen turning into total visual chaos. This branching capability is exactly how n8n nodes connect simple triggers to massive multi-step outcomes. But let's be practical for a second. What happens when an external API just completely fails, or a complex process, like having an AI generate a high-quality video, takes way too long? If nodes run sequentially and they expect immediate data, won't the whole workflow just error out and crash on you? Well, to prevent those nasty crashes, we use logic nodes as our safety nets. You can literally drop in a wait node to physically pause the workflow for, say, 30 seconds. Then you follow it up with an if conditional node to check a status string. Is the status completed? If true, awesome, the workflow proceeds. But if it's still in progress, the if node directs the workflow down a false branch that loops right back to another wait node. This clever little loop keeps your workflow alive, patiently checking over and over until the data is finally ready to go. Section 3. Powering nodes with AI.
Okay, this is where things get really wild. Turning a standard node into an autonomous AI agent requires three distinct elements. First, you have the LLM, or large language model. Think of this as the brain, like OpenAI or Anthropic. Second is context memory, because without memory, an AI forgets your name the literal second after you tell it. Memory gives it conversational state. And third, you have tools. These are the hands, APIs like a Google Docs reader or a web scraper that allow the AI to reach out and actually interact with the world.
Now, you've got to notice the crucial difference in how AI memory works here. Simple memory provides a short-term context window. It remembers the last 5 or so messages so you can have a natural, continuous chat. But vector or RAG memory, which stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation, is a whole different beast. It's long-term and totally searchable. It stores massive document databases, which allows an AI agent to instantly retrieve highly accurate, company-specific knowledge that definitely wasn't in its original training data. So what happens when you give this AI brain some tools? The whole logic dynamically shifts. First, the node receives user input from a trigger. Next, the LLM thinks about it. Then, based entirely on your prompt, the agent autonomously decides if an attached tool is required. That is incredibly powerful. If you ask it for today's weather, it just knows it needs to grab a web search tool. It executes that tool, digests the results, and passes the output right back into the workflow. Okay, quick pause, because here is a massive structural warning straight from our source material, so pay close attention to this one. For guaranteed actions, you must chain nodes sequentially instead of attaching them as optional tools to the AI agent. Look, if you attach a Gmail tool directly to an AI agent, the AI might decide not to use it, or it might just hallucinate. If you absolutely need an email sent every single time that workflow runs, no exceptions, you pull Gmail away from the AI and you chain it as a standalone action node right after it. Section 4. The big picture. Connecting the ecosystem. The sheer beauty of this entire node-based system is just how far you can push its extensibility. If a service you use doesn't have an official n8n node, you aren't stuck at all. You can use an HTTP request node to integrate literally any external API on the internet, whether you're scraping TechCrunch for financial news or, fetching random cat facts. You can also leverage community nodes built by other users to save time, or utilize pre-built templates from the marketplace to accelerate these massive multi-agent builds so you never have to start from scratch. Because of how elegantly n8n nodes connect workflows together, there is quite literally no limit to what you can build. So, let's tie this all together. We've seen exactly how these nodes pass data back and forth, how they make logical decisions, and even how they leverage AI to think and use tools completely autonomously, which really just leaves us with one final provocative question. Think about your own day-to-day. If an AI agent node can be built to read, research, and respond seamlessly on your behalf, what part of your job will you automate tomorrow? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to get out there and start experimenting with these workflows yourself.